The next hour and a bit, we are going to talk about how do we fund this transformation? What does it take to elevate non-driver focus to that conversation at the policy level, at the thought process level, at transportation boards. We're going to keep Zoom participants online with this conversation. Is that all right? Okay. And we have interpretation up until 3. Live captioning will remain open until 4. I did want to mention, so I want to ask the crowd, this is going to be a crowd choice. If there are people who are more interested in learning more about funding opportunities through the SCLEOs that we've mentioned sporadically throughout the last 2 days, including how you can contribute data, contribute your own interest in data, data structuring, and things of that nature, please raise your hands. And you should know that you can always ask us for private conversations via Zoom. You don't have to come back to have these conversations. So we're very happy to have those conversations, but if anybody's interested in doing that in the next hour, raise your hand. Okay, then we're all staying, oh, great. In the next hour, or, because we can always have this. Okay, all right. Okay, then we all get to continue this conversation. Thank you, Cameron, for coming back. I was not sure if you were still here. This is really, we get to kind of have an insight into the brain hive of people who think about this on an ongoing basis. So from insight to action also means from collective insight, and I hope that, for me, this has been a real moment. I've spoken to pretty much everybody in this room at least once about how do we elevate the non-driver's experience in the minds of the collective, right? Because that's what it will take. To have these conversations at scale means that people need to be aware that it's even a challenge for someone to get to a place. And in many places that's not even part of the conversation. Of course, we're here kind of speaking among the choir, but trying to challenge ourselves to understand what does it take to take this conversation forward is what we want to talk about here. And I think we have everybody in the room that can contribute to that and on Zoom. So please continue chat conversations out there. We will try to translate everything into the room if as we go.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Cameron Steinback, the Climate Justice Program Manager with Front and Centered. We are a coalition of BIPOC-led organizations across the state together and focused on climate and environmental justice on several and multiple topics, one of them being transportation justice. I've been with the coalition for about going on 2 years now, so there's been a lot of work and legacy that's gone into this work, from the ways in which we've engaged with our stakeholders across the state, the community leaders who have brought forward their concerns, their knowledge, and the desires for change that they want to see for transportation justice. One of those products of many different conversations that we've held and convenings was the Transportation Bill of Rights that outlines the key things that we've all been talking about here, or that you all have been talking about here in this past space, in which many of our organizations represent the needs and desires for safety, for accessibility, and affordability, for people to live their fullest lives and be able to move across and through their communities safely, affordably, and reliably. That's me summarizing without trying to name off the 10 points of the Transportation Bill of Rights. But that work continues in many facets, from the ways in which we do analysis on the budget so that folks can be informed and understand how the decisions at the top from the legislature and how they flow down through and into their communities, to the tangible actions that folks can take in their local cities, in their regions, so that frontline communities' expertise can be represented in the decisions that make our pathways through our communities real and safe and accessible. I'll go into a few more of the items in which we're doing and advocating and the resources and tools that we're building, from the analysis to the Transportation Justice Board game. But I also want to make sure we speak to the questions and curiosities that all of you have and that my colleagues here are working on as well. So that's my preamble of what we're up to at Front and Centered.
I think I'm moderating this session.
Take us home,
Cameron, when Front and Centered is really a grassroots organization, and is a statewide organization. When you have those conversations with communities across the state, do they see these as sort of separate individual issues, or is there sort of an organizing principle of like, hey, I have a lot of concerns about how to make my community better, and pollution and transportation and job access. Those, they all. How do they see these?
A lot of times the conversations are highlighting the specific issues or challenges that folks are encountering in their communities, or for the groups that they represent in their communities as well. So that is usually the starting point. And through the conversation, not just with the folks on the Front and Centered team, to hold and identify those unifying components of how these decisions are made or how resources are allocated, is like talking about the budget. And that's why we do our budget analysis, so folks can understand where it's coming from, what's supposed to show up, and then we can offer a critique collectively about, hey, it's not showing up the way you said it was supposed to, and using things like the HEAL Act, and how the agencies are responsible for responding to that. The other part in where it starts to like actually thread together is when you have community leaders or community organizations from either same parts of the state or different parts of the state recognize either common issues or just different common or at least overlaps in what are potential solutions, and of course ultimately recognizing our collective power that we can push and advocate for.
Maybe this is getting too much into the weeds, but Front Centered has done such terrific work for advocating to get folks with frontline experience into the rooms where decisions are getting made. And I'm curious, I guess, like, how do we, in the context of what we're trying to do with transit riders on transit boards, it feels like, you get someone on one of these boards, then how do they stay accountable, like, to the larger community? Like, how do we create these structures where frontline communities and people without lived experience have that sort of ongoing support and also are accountable towards the communities that they're working with and coming from? Maybe that's more weeds than we want to get to here, but that's the question that's on the top forefront of my head right now with how to do this work is that piece.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I'll throw on another hat that folks can continue to see how I approach my work with Front and Centered, and the ways in which I tackle questions like these, for getting power and knowledge and expertise from community into the decision-making process and holding those folks accountable. I believe, as a lifelong and continuing educator, is that how is community equipped to understand the processes, equipped to continue to not just like use their knowledge and expertise and direct experience about what's going on, but also recognizing the language that's in the law, the processes in which decisions are being made, and even the political mechanisms in which people are making decisions for the community, or making decisions that are making compromises or compromised in other ways, right? So I believe that, as always, knowledge is power. So my lens and my philosophy is the more tools and resources and places in which community can have those organic conversations as well as those focused conversations with their representatives that are from their communities, or holding those folks accountable, and that includes advocates and as well as ourselves. So continue to have and foster those places where community can have those rich organic dialogues that are centered in their values in which they want to hold.
Here, I'll let you moderate and take it to the next. All right.
I think what we were hoping that this session would be sort of more of a roundtable discussion, instead of just us up here. We're leaving the Zoom open, so I think we need to continue to be mic'd, right? But I'm wondering, who's monitoring the Zoom? How many people are in the Zoom still? 25 people. So we will continue to be mic'd, and we'll continue to be. So let's just open it up to folks that have questions, and we'll try to, as much as we can, just keep. So I guess the vision for this session was that all of us, and I'm looking at Brock also, are working together, but in different areas with slightly different focuses. And I was hoping that we could have this opportunity to sort of kind of share our homework a little bit. We're at the tail end of this legislative session, but what are your plans going forward? This is a little bit of a selfish kind of thing, because I really am curious to hear from you all in the room, like, what have you got in the works coming up, and how can we collaborate? How can we make sure that we're weaving our stories together into a bigger story? How do we, deconflict where we're going to bump into each other, and maybe we bump into each other sort of in the house, not in public, and use this time as sort of an organizing time is what I was hoping that we could do this with this time. Mr. Joe?
Thank you, Paulo. I want to follow up on something that was just shared a moment ago about accountability to community with these transit board positions. I've got a meeting lined up Wednesday to discuss it because I'm tired of waiting around. And one of the things I'm going to offer is put that person on a 2-year term limit. Say, you serve for 2 years, then you're done. Somebody else can come on. During that time, if I'm appointed to one of these positions, I intend to hold an office hour in a different community every month. And I'm going to be clear, that's only for residents. People who are non-residents, transit enthusiasts like us, shoot me a message. We'll set up a Zoom call. But I really think it's important that transit agencies really, truly be accountable to community and not just to focus groups or try to manufacture consent. I've seen that in my 10 years of activism, where sometimes the planner is just trying to manufacture consent to do something. And I'm like, that's not the purpose of a community advisory committee. We need to push back once in a while. And I served on one for quite a few years, and one of the reasons why I quit was because I just felt, the communication wasn't going the right way, and it was hard being passed over for chair every year because the person currently chair is somebody everybody likes. So it was all a deterrent to sticking around to spin my wheels. But, that's kind of my number one priority. And, it's a good time to also join the board because I want to kind of bring this up to the King County Metro people. Right now, Skagit Transit is considering joining ORCA, but ORCA does not have fare capping. And that's a big issue to me. And plus, our governance would be in a place in downtown Seattle without the meetings being recorded and without real remote access. So those are issues that are going to come up. And I kind of want to leave it on that hot potato to hopefully get the conversation going, because I guess that's my role around here. Thanks.
Thomas Craig?
Sure, thank you. One thing to respond to the homework and what's going on request, and then I also want to double click on something that Cameron said that I think is really important, that framing. You've heard me talk about the and Kurt talk about the destination access analysis. Many of you saw our presentation yesterday. I just want to be explicit about one of the intentions of that analysis, and hope you all do look for this report published in June. The goal here really is to bring some level of objective understanding to what the outcome of transportation decisions are. We need bottom-up conversation. We also need clear and concise and storytelling adjacent analysis that is using statewide and data, and that can kind of come from an objective or high-level perspective to support those bottom-up arguments. Access can be used to think about the effects of transportation systems around safety, around economic benefit, and around just the cost of transportation. And I say that basically to indicate, like, I think this can be useful in advocacy to think about how to move very big amounts of dollars, because at the end of the day, we're spending money in the wrong ways, in really inefficient ways, and we need to make that argument very clearly and very loudly. And lest anyone think I have a political bent in saying that, I want to emphasize that one of the strengths of that argument is that it's not, this is like, I believe in equity and access and safety, and these are really important things. But economic output and efficiency in a certain perspective and a cost-benefit analysis that actually, like, yields an economic surplus, and like, these are also important things. And I think if we do our analysis right, then we're really not coming at this from a leftist or progressive perspective. We're coming at this from a perspective of what works, and that this access analysis can really help a more nonpartisan and more broadly applicable argument about transportation that de-emphasizes some of the politics here. So I just want to make that connection and hope y'all read and let us know where we go wrong, because we will. Cameron, your comments and thinking about education and how that really works, I think are really important. And one thing I just want to comment on in response to that is, oftentimes I think as bureaucratists or whoever, some of us are, who are kind of engaged in wanting to both support public institutions but also work with community, I think sometimes we show up in community in a way that really is only about listening and only about hearing what those communities have to say. And that's really important. We need to listen to community. But we also have knowledge, and we also have experiences about how those systems of power work. And a good relationship where everyone is teaching and everyone is learning really does require that sometimes we show up and we share our knowledge actively, and not be scared to be a little bit wrong in some of the things that we try to share, and but hear how we're wrong. And I personally have had the experience of showing up in some spaces. Anna, you have a really excellent space with the Non-Drivers Alliance and the summit or sessions that you run, but I'll sometimes share my knowledge and share frankly what I see, and I always feel like that's always very appreciated by the people that I'm with, to just actually hear that and not just accept that or anticipate that I'm there to just listen to what the needs are and then walk out of the room and maybe do something about them back in my workplace, and maybe not. So I just want to emphasize and encourage people who are like me in a position of kind of working within public agencies to not be scared to call it how you see it. And, like if someone comes back and says, well, it's not quite like that, then have that be a discussion, but also be willing to teach as well as be willing to learn.
I'll just respond. Thank you, Thomas. And many other folks from WashShot, actually, and other agencies who have showed up at our community meetings. And, we have people who this is like maybe the first or second time they've ever heard the term like a transportation planner. I didn't know those terms, when I started in this advocacy work back with the story map 8 years ago, and so recognizing that it's so valuable to be able to share. And so that, those of us who want to change the system and have it work better for us, have access to some of the vocabulary and the terms and understand, like what Thomas was saying about the system. So the invitation is open if anyone is from an agency or doing work and wants to come present it to a group of non-drivers with accessible screens. So you have to verbally describe your slides. That is our only requirement. And engage in discussion with us. The door is open for that, because I think that is a really good way for us to learn, and also for you to learn from us and get sometimes reality checks about how much the system is failing us a lot daily.
How often do you do it on it?
That is a good question. We just changed the schedule, and it's been massively confusing to everyone. So for the month of March, we're doing national calls, and we'll be starting again monthly in April. We were doing weekly, but it's a lot with getting ready for Week Without Driving. So it will be monthly. Again, we'll be scheduling guest speakers starting in April. So if you want to be a guest speaker, we welcome you to come. And if you want to plan with Week Without Driving activities with us, those are weekly planning sessions between now and October. So you can come show up at any of those and strategize with us about how to get your electeds and agency leads to come try it for a day or a trip or a week.
Well, I'll take one plug. The predecessor to the accessibility study was the frequent transit analysis, which I want to give kudos to Anna and Paulo and the team at Front and Centered for winning that in the state legislature. I think Anat asked us to come up here and talk about funding, and key to that conversation is giving legislators something to buy. And the beauty of the frequent transit study was we finally could say, hey, if we want to get, so I think it was today, only 7% of Washingtonians are within a 15-minute, and we didn't even know if it was an accessible walk, distance to frequent transit. If we wanted to get that number up to 25 or 50, it would cost this many billions or this much money. And that is so useful for us to get organized around, all right, this is our ask, this is what we want legislators to buy, this is what will make us happy. Because on the flip side, the folks who are asking for us to widen roads or expand freeways or keep mega projects going have these super simple things for legislators to buy. And the more that we can articulate to say, this is what we want you to buy to make our state more accessible, it's just really, really powerful. So I'm so excited to see that moving forward on the accessibility work you all are doing, and just huge kudos to Anna and Paulo and the Front and Center team for kicking that off.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good point. Have something for people to say yes to, right? Brock, I was wondering if Brock, you could just sort of introduce yourself and tell a little bit of the work that you do, and tell us your plans for the next year.
Thank you. I got called out twice now.
I know. I'm trying to get more people to talk.
So my name is Brock, Brock Howell. I'm the executive director of two nonprofits in Snohomish County, Snohomish County Transportation Coalition, or SNOTRAC, and an organization that's recently renamed and expanded, Stations Unidos. And I was going to start off by actually going back to something Kirk was talking about and we were discussing previously, and then I'll go into what I'm doing, which is how do we build momentum for these projects that are happening and make sure that they do happen. In Everett, we have North Broadway and Evergreen Way, which are stroads or main streets, and they need substantial road diets, revisions, be made into human scale streets. Both are in qualified census tracts. So as we think about like where we need to prioritize this infrastructure, they're there. But I'm dealing with jurisdictions that don't deal well with one another and don't have a hard time with long-term visioning in some situations, or is the particular project isn't their highest priority. Some of the priorities might be really good too. Some of them might not be so good. But there are also agencies that don't do well, or governments that don't do well with a lot of public pressure. They're not used to it. There's a lot of muscle memory in Seattle, or muscle. There's a lot of strength in the muscle of dealing with the public, where an elected official and an agency official is used to receiving thousands of comments and responding to it and being okay with it. In a lot of other jurisdictions across the state, that is not the case. And so as an advocate, you can't just go in and do what you did in Seattle to turn out thousands of people and expect a different outcome. In some situations you can, because you can find the understanding within the electeds for it. But in most situations you can't, where you'll have a negative response and the agency will clam up. So me going from Seattle up to Snohomish County, I have a lot of learning that I've had to do over the past 7 years of like, how do I be a good advocate? And I'm still learning, and I'm shifted tactics towards more of building organizations as much as I can in terms of providing services and being a thought leader, and less of being an activist all the time and being more of a framer of changes. So in the next year, a lot of things that we're doing is partnerships, and so opportunities that Washtop provides is huge for us. Because it means we can be on the ground organizing people, and it can be around things like this. On March 26th, we get to have a task force center walk audit, and that's fantastic. That's an opportunity for building up our work and beginning to start to build that political muscle memory with the electeds and agency officials and being able to use that data. So Stations Unidos, we're a community development corporation that's going to be focused on like regridding South Everett, making a safe, walkable place, and building abundant housing and good jobs within that area. A lot of it's going to be on the on the housing side, right, or the land use side of activity, and then working very intentionally with the community there, which is like 40% Spanish speaking, to know what their priorities are and try to reflect it in their outcomes. And that's going to be a multi-year effort. On the snow track side, a lot of it is like, how do we do more? Like we bring a lot of coalitions together of transportation agencies. We need to continue to do that, make them feel comfortable in that space, and continue to see where we can find synergies between our two county-based transit agencies, Everett Transit and Community Transit, so they work better together because they don't work that well together. And then having opportunities to like standing up bike libraries and other programs, like whatever program we can do to provide a service is just fantastic for us to be able to build what we do with community in that space. So we're just trying to do as much as we can on that front. But that was my main takeaway, which is like, if we're building these infrastructure projects across the state, we need the capacity, like the financial capacity as organizers or nonprofit organizations to be able to build the political movement for them. And that almost has to be before we have the project, right? So those who are funders in the room, look for opportunities to build organizations. It might not be on that direct project. It might be building capacity in the organization in other ways, so that way they can do the advocacy that's needed later down the road.
This one going.
Just in response real quick to what Brock was saying, I echo that so much. And, you know, I've been helping the Tasker Center organize these walk roll events around the state. And of course I went first to all the places that there was capacity, where there were organizations like Brock's and Tacoma on the Go, down to the School for the Blind, actually down in the Vancouver area was a great resource down there. And it really is, you know, those community places, like, because I can't, from Seattle in my little home, set up a community event and get elected officials to come out and community members to come out. Like, you need that on the ground capacity, and there's so little of it really outside of Seattle as far as like where the resources go.
Yeah, absolutely. To that point, I would say like Transportation Choices Coalition, about 25% of our funding comes from transit agencies in cities. And there's a reason why you pay for a therapist. You pay for someone to make you better. And I think that's what more public agencies should do, is help fund the capacity. And of course, there's always limitations to that, but at least having someone who is working to organize and build up support is huge. And I think public dollars should go more to funding education, and a small amount of dollars can go an extremely long way in funding existing community organizations to do this work.
These are all just connections and support for the ways in which we're talking about the community work and the advocacy and the many different ways in which it's happening, the ways that TCC is doing it, the way that Brock, you were speaking to it. And I want to tie back together what Thomas was speaking to, and how there's so much expertise in this room, and some of the things that I'm always recognizing and speaking to as well with our coalition, there's expertise within those organizations as well. So the more that we continue to think about the ways in which we share that expertise or educate with or for community, it's respecting that fact that there's expertise and knowledge. And I break down education as not so much as trying to fill up a cup, but to exercise in a practice. Because if we recognize there's skill, expertise, ability, and knowledge across all of us, including community members, that those practices, those solutions in terms of where money flows, in terms of what projects are done, in terms of who does that work, it might not be your agency that's best equipped to do that. It might be that community organization that says, actually, we have the penetration to speak to this issue, to get the input that you need, and actually there's expertise that should be a part of your decision-making team. So education as practice or praxis.
Thank you. I'm Casey Gifford. I'm with King County Metro, but I'm going to take that hat off for right now. I live in the city of Tacoma, and we're working on trying to pass a streets levy. It did not pass last year.
So sad.
Yes, and so I feel like we've talked a lot about influencing elected officials, and I'm hoping to hear a little bit more about how to influence voters and get them to vote for safe streets. And I'm specifically wondering, Kirk, you have a lot of experience doing that in Seattle, and what does it take for TCC to take a leading role outside of Seattle, where there's a lot, as I think Anna just said, there's a lot of grassroots support already here, and the voters are very progressive. And to Brock's point, like that's not the case throughout the rest of the state.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and a lot of it comes by supporting the organizations and the people who are there in those communities who want to lead. I'll point to last year when we won the Yes on Ellensburg Transit campaign in Ellensburg, Washington, where they voted for 66% of the voters voted to fund their transit agency out there. And it was us seeing this coming up as expiring, connecting with council members there and local folks at Central Washington University who wanted to run a campaign to invest in this, and providing support to them to be able to create those messages and lead that campaign. We are supporting, working with Tacoma on the Go on supporting Pierce Transit and going to the ballot this November. I think one of the most important things we could do for mobility justice in this entire state is just to get the buses in Pierce County to run twice as often. They stop far too early in the evening. They run extremely infrequently on weekends. And Pierce Transit went to the vote in 2011 and 2012 to try and increase their sales tax to fund more bus service. And in 2012, they failed by just 700 votes. And 12,000 voters voted for Barack Obama at the top of the ticket, but didn't get to the bottom to vote for this ballot measure. So we have a huge push right now this November to be able to win that ballot measure. I think now is the right time. This is going to be an extremely strong transit ballot measure election. We have a constellation of great leaders at the transit agency, on the transit agency board, and the county executive who actually believe in transit. And so the way that we win is recognizing that there's great folks like Laura at Tacoma on the Go who have the Tacoma connections, but there's so many other places outside of Tacoma in Pierce County that need help in organizing. So we're going to support with our staff time in communities like Fircrest, Lakewood, working in Puyallup to make sure that folks know the importance of transit up until that campaign officially starts. But Anna, Paulo.
I mean, yeah, we got to get some, organizers from those communities on salary. And like with that, I feel like that's the question is how, where does that money come from? Because, compared to organizations in Seattle that are relatively well staffed, this work is not well funded. And ultimately, I mean, I guess my other critique of this larger situation that we're in, budget-wise, I mean, there's many, many larger situations, but there's a relative amount of money for like tech solutions to problems, but when it goes out to funding community organizers from communities like Lakewood, right, to go out and turn out votes, to get a ballot initiative, to get transit funding, nobody's funding that, and that feels really hard, and it's
There is so much need. There's so much need. Folks, funders should be funding so much more of this work and funding people in communities or creating positions for people in communities to fill. And I'll just go to follow up on your point. The fact is these mega projects or so many road projects don't need their communities to vote yes to raise their own sales tax to get them funded. The fact that we have to go to the ballot and do all this work and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on campaigns to get people to vote yes for this, rather than just having our legislators do that, it's just wrong. And as nice as it is to give TCC work to do these ballot measure campaigns, I don't want to do that. Like, I'd rather our legislators just get their act together, value transit, and fund it, and that's going to take organizing from us. Anyway, thanks.
Yes.
Take funding from funders to pay for our organizers.
But to Cameron's point earlier, that is the reason for framing this as a question of rights, right? You don't put your rights up to a ballot and say, can I please have a decent, safe way to get around in my neighborhood, yes or no? That is a fundamental right of belonging. And we need to figure out how this just comes packaged with living in a place, right? That when you frame it like that, to say we're going to establish rights, we're going to show where rights are being violated, and we're going to fight for justice and rinse and repeat. And the way in which we do things now, privilege rises to the top, and privilege makes policy, and the projects that further privilege get rubber stamped, and the projects that provide justice we have to fight for, and that's just the way that it is for now. So we have to fund these movements, and we have to keep fighting so that we can get the things that we deserve. How long are we going to do this, Anand? I know, but I can't remember.
I think it's wonderful to talk about how to package it, but when you start talking about the details, that's when our coalitions break. That's when we are more challenged to start talking about the detail, the specifics, like what is the package? Who gets to choose? Who do we consider in this conversation, right? We went around here, and even amongst us, I think we have very different views on who are non-drivers, right? It's a hugely heterogeneous population. It is representing populations that are not always in agreement with each other, albeit they have similar needs, wants, desires, views about what their dreams and futures look like. So can we hone in on a little bit of the detail to suss out some of the challenges?
What are you saying specifically? You start. Get into the details or not.
I mean, we can talk about the basket of goods. Let's just talk about that. What does that look like? To whom and how many, and right, like how many grocery stores are enough, how many schools are enough, what kinds of schools, who gets access to schools when we are in a city that's trying to shut down schools because people are moving away, people are not wanting their kids to participate in the public school system, right? Like we have these other associated challenges that surface when we start talking about these detailed definitions of what does everybody need? What does justice look like for our varied residents? I see Cameron smiling. I'll smile back.
I mean, I guess like in coalition work that it is often like, we're not going to get a consensus on any of that. And I guess like maybe what I sort of see is like what is the lowest common, like what is the thing that we can agree on we want? We want a map of sidewalks statewide. We agreed on that, right? We're like, yes, we need this data. We need to know where sidewalks don't exist. Okay, what now? What increment above that? And maybe we could start the other way and dream big and vision all that together, but it feels really hard, especially when you start talking about schools. As a parent who has conversations with other parents, I feel like that is like the hardest thing to have conversations about. But yeah, like so we all want sidewalks. Do we want like where do we want sidewalks to exist? Is it like the WashDOT sort of mapping it within census-defined population centers? I believe is the terminology. Do we also say that we want transit access in between all of those census-defined population centers, statewide, right? Some sort of inner urban connection, right? Interstate connection. I don't know. Yeah, I'm just throwing things out there. Go ahead, Cameron.
No, I mean, like the look on my face was one of responding to like the challenge of the question, like right when you get down to the details, and so much of what my first response to that was like, how do you keep that coalition? How do you keep that work together? And I always come back to like where you start with the values, and then how you're using different metrics or conversations that get at how do we stop the harm, right? That's the question, like what does justice look like? You got to make sure you're stopping the harm, and then from that place you can actually create or attend to the different solutions. So this is me saying like I don't have a specific answer, but I think about the foundations and the steps that are agreed upon or worked through to get through those really tough places in which you're not going to get full consensus, or you may not get full consensus. We should never give up on trying to attend to everyone's needs, but I often get to like, okay, what are our values? Where are we agreeing? Where the harm is happening? And then we hit that point, because so much of my just attuning to this work, which is movement work, sometimes it's trying to get those wins and those quick shifts, being able to protect against the shocks, right? The opposition or the sometimes insurmountable challenge of like there's just no money to do that, right? And the disappointment and the delay that can happen when those things occur. So like those are like the kind of conversations that I've experienced in community, those frustrations, those cracks that start to form. But that's why I come back. What are the values? What's the harm we're trying to address right now? How long are we going to continue to push and pull that? And recognizing all of this is movement work, and how do you keep feeding that movement and respond to those shocks and those shifts? It's all part of the process, it's part of the practice. But yeah, if you got more tangible solutions, love to hear them.
I mean, yeah, let's break it down. So harms start with discovery. I think there are over 30% of the population that don't have the mechanism to even discover services that they might be eligible for, available to them. We have a team here that's working on that for sure. But how do we ensure that that's statewide, not just for 2 counties, 3 counties? That's the first harm. The first harm is you don't take a ride because you have no idea what's available to you and how to get there. Discovery. Number 2, planning. Now that I know what my choices are, if I have any choices, how do I choose among them in ways that are interpretable to me? I have limitations, I have certain concerns, I need to bring a gaggle with me. I have no gaggle, but no support. Like, how do I make sure that my plan works out? And also I have plan B and C, because a lot of the times plan A doesn't pan out. as we know, right? So even those two things, I haven't even changed infrastructure yet at all. It's just about discovery and planning and making sure that we have equitable mobility justice for everybody who wants to take a trip. Because 2 years ago, when you participated with us, it was all about people not taking rides. They don't have the mechanism to even identify what is available to me today, and can I have a choice about anything that I do? Mode choice, time choice. You know, Kunal talked about yesterday the ability to make decisions. A lot of times we have no decisions to make. And so, you know, it starts right there. Obviously, we can talk about what kinds of investments infrastructure-wise would enable more choice with a lot less discovery and planning. But to me, I think we have to start on talking about what it really does take to take a trip as a non-driver who might be on the margins of what's considered to be a traveler.
I think that's a great summation of where we move and how we move through that. So thank you. I'm always looking for a good question. I make sure I keep responding to.
I guess I'll add. I mean, one thing, Cameron, you shared that this is like movement work, and that we're. I don't know, I've been doing sort of movement work my whole life, and I had a colleague at one point, because I was really grumpy that I had skipped a thing I really wanted to do for something work-related, you know, movement-related, and then the movement-related thing canceled, and I was even more grumpy, and he was sort of like, you know, that this work, like, you can't do this work out of a sense of crisis and, like, that you're going to solve it, because it's never going to, like, it will never get solved within your lifetime, and that you have to do this work in a way that is sustainable and sort of, for you as a person in the long term, recognizing that this, like, you're never going to get to justice. And so that's sort of, I don't know, how I think about this work a lot, and the way I frame it in my own life is just that, like, while there is so much, like, harm or, you know, injustice, and that you want to fix it, and you want to have all that angst, and you want to have that urgency, at the same time too, like, it has to, as individuals, we have to approach this as you know, something that we're going to contribute a little piece of, and then we're going to, you know, pass it on to other people. And I guess the more people who get it passed it on to, the more the movement grows. So that's sort of my frame of mind these days is that sort of, you know, thinking of it as movement work, versus a crisis that I'm going to fix in my lifetime.
It's all about the friends we make along the way. But I think to that point, it's why it's so important to make sure youth voices are a part of all this work. And I think it's been invigorating to me, or just eye-opening to me, doing some of our youth transportation advocacy 101s and thinking back to this is as we open light rail across the lake, on Cross Lake, and realizing the ballot measure campaign in 2008 and the advocacy that had to happen back then. And you talk with some of the people who are part of those campaigns, and just some of the things that we just take for granted about just light rail operating and not having to match our transit investments to roads investments as we were forced to in 2007. And talking with advocates today, young advocates, that things that they had to agree to back then, just we wouldn't even support today. And just seeing that progress and the progress that we made there is why it's, I know, helpful for me to work with youth advocates, but I think it's just something that we need to center in all of our work, because it, I know, helps you do this work for the long term.
But while we're talking about harms here, I want to start with a difficult question for Kirk. Right now, Sound Transit is billions of dollars in the hole. Would you be willing to give back your money if that would help speed up projects? Because that would sure help all of us transit riders out here. Here's the second question for you, bud.
Let's go.
You give it back, good, because, you know, I really think we need to have these agencies focused on, instead of sponsoring events in the community like skating rinks in Bellevue, you know, focused on delivering the transit service, and more of it quickly, faster, more efficiently, because some of us in this room, we are running out of time. You know, I'm 43. I'm about to turn 44 next month. You know, I'm trying to start my second small business in an utter recession just to get off of Social Security disability. And, you know, everywhere I go, it's going to be 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours on public transit, one way. I mean, you want to talk about harm? There's your harm. And I'll add something else too, Kirk, because, you know, I'm a bit two-faced, and you can throw a cream pie in my face to help fundraise to replace the Sound Transit money anytime, or have me in a dunk tank and watch me fall into a tub of ice, brother. But, you know, we need to get ballot measures up a lot easier than trying to beg these transit boards to put up a ballot measure, because I keep calling up mine in Skagit County, and I'm like, it goes in one year and it goes out the other. They don't. It's like they don't have the bandwidth or the courage to understand that we need to have the money on hand to meet our community where they are, so they can have full and productive lives. And I'll leave you with that. Thanks.
No, Joe, I think that's a great point. I think what you bring up, the cost of what it means every single day to people who can't get to opportunity, who can't take those trips, that can't reach those resources that Anat was talking about because the transit system isn't there. That's why the work that Anna's doing organizing non-drivers is so critical, to be able to elevate and amplify those stories and get those into our decision makers' heads of realizing what the cost is every single day we don't do this. I think back to that Pierce Transit measure, if they had won in 2012, how much more rich the lives of people over the last 14 years in Pierce County would be if they could have that service and what they could do. And Joe, to your first point, I think we're a damn fine investment. So I'm going to have encourage them to keep funding us. And I think the one point I would say, people want these light rail projects built yesterday. They're incredibly popular. A Como poll found that expanding light rail is more popular than the Seattle Kraken or the return of the Supersonics, and which is why we've been pushing in the legislature to give Sound Transit the authority for a 75-year bond bill that allows them the flexibility to start on these projects now. And these are 300-year projects. We should have the flexibility to pay for them over a longer amount of time so we can get them built ASAP to put people to work, to start giving people that benefit, and start addressing the accessibility needs that everyone faces without that great transit. So thank you for that question, Joe.
I just want to add, because what you just shared made me think about a really great research opportunity for any researchers in this room. The economic cost of all of that lost opportunity between 2012 and now for Pierce Transit residents. That would be epic. Someone wants to figure out how to calculate that number, or a rough, calculation of that number, because yeah. Ooh, nice.
I do have those numbers. I'll get them to you next.
Yeah.
yeah. I'll get those.
Sorry. That'd be incredible.
I'll get those to you.
Let's highlight that, because it's huge.
Jeff?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. One thing I haven't heard much today, and I'm curious on your thoughts. I have predictions of what they are, but I want to let you answer. Corporations. I haven't heard much about the role of how companies could either be stakeholders in terms of driving for change on behalf of their employees, perhaps selfishly, perhaps unselfishly, funding, probably on the same context, like could be selfish, could be unselfish, and then the third kind of potential role as provider. I feel like very soon we're going to be running into the situation where we've got AVs on the street operated by Waymo. I already see them scanning. I'm from Philadelphia. They're already scanning my street with their LiDAR. I could imagine a world where a non-driver, this gets to the kind of potential fracturing of the non-driver world. I could imagine a world where a Waymo is a fantastic innovation for me. I can go anywhere. It drives itself. Maybe hopefully it's accessible. I think it will be. But it won't have union labor involved. It won't have public funding, or it may. There's a lot of tensions there, and I guess I'm curious, how do you all imagine navigating those?
I'll take your corporation question real fast. Yeah. One, of course, paying more in taxes to fund our services, full stop. But I think the other pitch I'll put into is something that Paulo led on. And I think if you look that way to Seattle Children's Hospital, not a corporation, but a great model, Paulo was the lead of their transportation department. And he put in programs that would pay you to walk, bike, or take the bus in. They had a company bike program that would give you a bike if you promised to bike 2 days a week to work. But I think more importantly, there was a culture in the organization from the top on down that this was good for our mission for us to walk and bike and take transit. And this helped achieve just a better hospital for our patients. And it was something that we should do. And you had the vice president who was an everyday biker who believed in this. And so I do think there's a lot that, it sounds silly to say, but corporate leadership can do to say to their employees, like, you walking, biking, taking transit in is really important. And we've got great commute trip reduction laws in the state that help make that a very easy thing for them to do. But let me stop there, and I'll let others jump onto the Waymo question.
Yeah, I mean, just on the corporations real quick, I mean, just, Amazon has been a tremendous partner on Week Without Driving, which, leave that for what it is, but it funded that funding. We were able to distribute as mini grants to communities throughout Washington State and community organizations. So Spokane built, I think it was 29 bus benches. Anyone know that number? With a $3,000 grant, and they actually got all the lumber donated. They used the money to pay local artists, which was so cool. Move Redmond did a whole bunch of work. Up in Bellingham, they did a bunch of events around Week Without Driving, all funded through that. And so, what is a tiny donation in the scale of these corporations does make a big difference, but 100% the tax piece as well. I'll just say on Waymo, I've ridden them in Phoenix a couple times, and I do have, as someone who can't drive, the first time I got in one, I was like, this is the first time I've been in a car by myself ever, and it was like this freedom, and I was like, wow, this is amazing, this is so cool. And I was like, can I have a beer with me? Can I drink it? And then I was like, oh my gosh, if I drink it, is my Google account gonna get locked and I'll lose access to all my email and everything? But I think the problem with it is it was too easy, right? It was too convenient, and it was too cheap, just like Uber was back in the day. The subsidization of those rides makes it really, really attractive. They're not wheelchair accessible, though. They, have no one. If you're blind, there's a lot of questions around how are you going to access that vehicle? How are you going to then exit that vehicle safely? I've gotten in the wrong Ubers before because I can't read license plates. And so, many, many questions around there around safety. But I think fundamentally it's about, entrenching us deeper into a car-dependent system that is going to exclude some people because of cost and because of disability and because of geography. And I don't want to live in a system where I have to be driven everywhere, right? That's not the world that I would like to live in. And so I think we have to really ask ourselves, as they come into our communities and they're cheap, because they're subsidized and they're easy for some of us to use, is that bringing us closer to the kind of community that includes everyone and the kind of community that, we want to get in? And and a big part of that is the land use piece, right? If it makes it easier for people to travel further distances, then things are going to get further apart, right? Housing is going to be farther from services. Jobs are going to be further, if that travel cost is less for some people. So
when we talk about that, like the cause and effect, and sometimes transportation is on the chopping block when we talk about a lot of things, and when we talk about self-driving cars, other things that might be really good in some ways, but there are more than 3 million driving jobs in the U.S., and those driving jobs are oftentimes underserved populations are folks who are filling those jobs. And so I love the idea of the self-driving cars. Love them. But the impact is what the impact is. And so I think that should be a part of that conversation with transportation folks. What is the impact? What would be on the chopping block, and who would be on the chopping block if that is something that is advocated for?
Seattle Times article yesterday on Uber drivers too, if anyone's interested in the labor implications of that.
Yeah, I wanted to weigh in on the subject of Waymo. I don't know about the other companies. For Waymo to work, it requires a certain level of infrastructure of things like curbs and road conditions and things that actually don't really solve problems for a lot of parts of the for a lot of areas where there just aren't that sort of thing, and it's rural areas. It's not even just rural areas. It's like parts of King County that are, lacking in transportation infrastructure. The other point is that there's a wonderful rant, a woman on YouTube who lives in the Portland area who has a wonderful rant about Waymo is actually monitored by humans, and the humans are located in the Philippines. So if Waymo's busy putting immigrant drivers out of work in the U.S., where people have to take driving tests and understand the rules of the road, and being monitored by somebody in the Philippines who's watching 6 cars at once or whatever, I'm not automatically sold on that as a transportation enhancement. So, and I have to say, that in all humility, Waymo's also spending a lot of money promoting itself to blindness organizations. And so I want to say, yes, keep spending money, but we're still, we still have challenges about your product. So that's probably enough rant about that topic right now. But I do have to say thank you, Waymo, for supporting blindness organizations and buying the free consulting along with.
Yeah, comment here.
Thank you. And another alternative that we can have is, instead of relying on private corporation, to have government funding to go toward accessible transportation outside of public transit to reduce the stopgap in areas that public transit doesn't reach, or somewhere a little bit far away. An example that I have is in Chicago, there's a accessible taxi service that is funded by the city called Kirk, and it is accessible, fully wheelchair accessible, and it's very easy to reach if you are in the Chicago area. So that way, when people are looking for Uber or Lyft versus having the option of Curve, which is already vetted by the city, a lot of times it's easy to choose the latter. And obviously, outside, it gives people the flexibility as well as another option in addition to public transit. And with people who are with disability and people who have blind or visual impaired, you can go through a separate app as well to request the transit service. So that's another way that we can think about it, and not having to rely on all privatized transportation.
Go ahead, Amara.
So I'm going to talk more about Waymo. I'm also visually impaired. I have congenital nystagmus like Anna does. And I spent a lot of time in San Francisco last year, and I don't know how the transportation budget down there works at all, so I won't pretend like I do. But I will say, I think when I was taking Waymo often, I had the same thought where I was like, okay, I'm alone in a vehicle for the first time, this is great. But once I started thinking about other times, my other favorite ways of riding public transportation or transportation in general, it's at a certain point I was like, well, I also really like it when I'm the only one on a public bus and it's just me and the bus driver, that's probably my actual fave. And comparing, I think over the past year and a half, I would say, the amount of Waymos and Zooks on the road has increased a lot. And also I noticed the last time I was there, they're expanding in the Bay pretty far. They just started, testing on the highway and stuff, and they're experimenting with bigger vehicles and things like that, which again is cool just for rapid response, direct response, transportation for disabled people. I think that's amazing, but compared to the public, the bus system in San Francisco, the Muni, it is so underfunded. The bus stop situation in San Francisco is abysmal, and it does make me think, yes, while I do love it when Waymos are stalling at crosswalks, because they're really slow and they stop really far away from the crosswalk, so cars can't zoom past them, which I love that, but I would also, I think there are trade-offs because, you know, at the end of the day, I would rather just be in a bus. So that's just my 2 cents from a visually impaired person who, you know, yeah, increased bus funding, I think, is, important. But
Yes, cheers to that. more bus funding. I think we're going to wrap it up in a few minutes. So on a week without driving happens every year, right? When is the next week without driving?
You're reminding me, I have stickers and flyers.
That's right. Yes.
October 1st through 8th is the week without driving this year. We are just starting to look for sponsors. So if you are with an organization that wants to sponsor this year, we would love that. We're doing a special award ceremony this year. And so sponsors can sponsor an award. You can get to pick you get to create the award if you sponsor it. So like, longest bus trip or elected official that spent the most moments, walking on streets without sidewalks, for example, could be awards. So that's something exciting we're piloting this year. So weekwithoutdriving.org is the website. And I will have some stickers and flyers out at the happy hour, if that's all right. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
And Brock, you have something coming up this fall as well, right?
Brock or me?
I'm looking at Brock because he's got the microphone.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, I'm not sure what's coming this fall that you're thinking of, but I have maybe a good comment. I don't know. I wanted to follow up on something that not said earlier or finished with in our last comment, which was a lot of our challenge is just people don't know the transportation options that exist. It's a lot longer of a comment, but that was the gist of it. And so, first, fast, frequent, dedicated, legible transit is key. I think the opening of light rail, just the test runs across the bridge of having extra light rail trains going from Seattle to Linwood has been transformative for those in that corridor, in that you can, today I waited only 2 minutes between the train I missed versus the next train. So there was no planning involved in that. You just showed up and you're going, right? So that, at one level, is a solution, but it's a big picture one. It's one that, like, the 1996 voters who passed Sound Move had to wait 12 years, which means someone who had a 4-year-old, that 4-year-old was, 16 or whatever, right, by the time they got to use the first train. So the things that we're doing on that front are really long-term. So providing solutions today is all about education. And so I wanted to highlight the work around findaride.org that HopeLink is doing of trying to provide a tool for those who don't drive and who maybe don't use fixed route transit, of here's all the other transportation options at your disposal. And so there's a lot of hard work being done on the data and the software side to provide a comprehensive tool for folks in the Central Puget Sound for how to get around, which is a great tool. But we did a survey, Snowtrack with partners did a survey a couple of years ago, like nearly 6,000 respondents, to get a sense of people's transportation insecurities in the region. And one of the questions was, what do you use for navigating? And so we split it by demographics. So one of the things that you'll find is pretty much everybody uses Google Maps and Apple Maps to navigate. So we've got to get the tool we're developing into Google Maps and Apple Maps for it to really be widely adopted. Eventually, we've got to provide a proof of concept, make it easy enough to make that happen. But that's where people are navigating. So there's like one thing we got to work towards. The other thing, though, is people who are recent immigrants who don't speak English, you would expect that they might rely on their friends and family for how they get around. They don't. Why? Because their friends and family don't speak English. And so they rely on Google Maps and Apple Maps even more. But they may not find that tool to be very good. And so I think, programs like HopeLink's community mobility, community transportation navigators, thank you. I knew I was going to get there. is really key for training people who don't speak English to provide opportunities is not great. You got to go find those people, be very proactive, have a lot of funding for it. That's a challenge, but having transit agencies as partners is key. And hopefully we can use tools like Find a Ride to help train those individuals as well, especially for programs like 201 or their antecedent or their the new iterations of 201 of where you call a resource center and they can help navigate you using Find a Ride or another tool to get where you need to go. So I wanted to thank Task Force Center for being part of the data ecosystem because part of the issue is just like, yeah, we can maybe tell you, here's the transportation service providers that will get you where you need to go in a way that's like Google Maps. But currently, the data layer of like sidewalk infrastructure is not there, or ADA ramps. So we might be sending somebody on a trip that they can't actually use. So we're all in this together, and I wanted to thank folks for doing that.
Since we're in this moment of plugging upcoming events, I want to highlight one upcoming event we have in partnership with Lynn and Heather at HopeLink. March 14th, we are doing a Rural Transportation Advocacy 101 thanks to HopeLink. Please get a flyer, talk to Lynn, talk to Heather. It's going to be in North Bend on Saturday, March 14th. We are going to have a great panel, a great Transportation 101. It is Pie Day. There will be literal pies. I hope you all can join. It's going to be a great event, and HopeLink is just a great partner for this. And then 2 more quick plugs since Brock is in the room. We, as Joe alluded to, there's a lot happening with Sound Transit and the future of light rail. So we are leading what we're calling our Build the Damn Trains town halls to get Sound Transit board members to hear from the public about what they want to see as Sound Transit move forward with this, and give those board members an opportunity to say what their priorities are. And we're doing those in partnership with organizations across the region. We're doing one in Everett on April 14th with SnowTrack. We're doing one on April 27th with Tacoma on the Go, and we have one coming up on March 30th in Bellevue with Move Redmond. So I'll make sure we can get out more information, but most importantly, March 14th with HopeLink Rural Transportation Advocacy 101.
Looking forward to all of these activities, and I'll be showing up as best I can for each one. And for Front and Centered, as you're looking for ways to have facilitated conversations, or active conversations with community groups, I'm glad to continue rolling out our Transportation Justice board game, share the lessons learned from our conversations with WashDOT, with community members, and of course building on the shared expertise, knowledge, and practice.
I think, as Brock said, we're all in this together. For one, we're taking notes, so we'll send out the list of all the actions. I'm hoping that people will find those activities that they can participate in. I want to call out to everybody else to shout out any events or participatory actions that others can join them on. Specifically for us, we have we were talking about youth education. We run the AI for All program at UW, and that is actually a multi-week opportunity for high schoolers to engage on data science activities with non-ableist AI bend. We try to recruit over 50% of our student population who self-identify as having a disability, to get them engaged in understanding how to manage data, how to manage AI, and how to use that for equity practices. And a lot of it, because of what we do, we engage them on using transit and transportation data to deploy these activities. So I'll send out a little bit of a blurb to those of you who deal with student and youth populations. And it's remote, so they can be anywhere. Anybody else who wants to share?
Yeah, thank you. Lynn McCarthy, King County Mobility Coalition Program Supervisor at HopeLink. We are re-aliving the story map, as Anna spoke about earlier. We're looking for people to share stories with us who are experiencing high barriers to transportation. And we're hoping for 20 stories to populate a map similar to what Anna and her crew did 8 years ago, that will be used as a tool when we're talking with decision makers and transportation planners. The aim is to humanize the data that we're required to speak about, sharing people's stories. We heard from everyone on the panel this morning, from Claudia and the other electeds, how important storytelling is in the conversation around transportation planning. So we are hoping we can form relationships with people who are experiencing really high barriers to accessing health and well-being in their communities and families, and share those stories with people when we talk about transportation solutions. So you might have seen the flyer on your table. There's a QR code there that takes you straight to an interest form. If somebody's interested in sharing a story, they can just submit that form. It comes right to me, and then I'll be in touch with them.
Yeah, it's always. Am I on? Am I live? Okay. Yes. It's always fun when I get to talk about giving money away. So I'm going to talk about giving money away. WashDOT's Active Transportation Division has our call for projects open now for 2 programs, Safe Routes to School and the Pedestrian Bicyclist Program. Deadline is April 15th, easy date to remember. And cities and tribes and counties can all apply for those, and nonprofits if it fits into the mission of either of those. The legislature has been steadily increasing the amount we have to award thanks to the Climate Commitment Act. And so thank you to all advocates who work to sustain that funding, because that's really critical. And that's for real on-the-ground improvements. So check with your jurisdictions, ask if they're applying, encourage them to apply. We will have a call later for the Sandy Williams Connecting Communities program. Clara had to leave, so I don't have that date in my head, which focuses on current and former state highways, which might sound familiar as a place that needs improvement. Doesn't have a ton of money, but it now has a sub-program with a dedicated transfer every quarter into the account, which is a legislative action. Claudia talked about forcing action, so ongoing funding. And you may have heard about our e-bike rebate voucher program. We're going to have another round of applying to get a voucher. The stories of the difference those e-bike vouchers made to people are incredible. It is often the transportation freedom that people really, really needed. I hate to give a date in case something happens with the vendor, but look towards the end of March, early April, and you will see the chance to apply again. And then we're going to be, now that we have the system really up, we'll be able to do kind of a rolling process. There will be additional opportunities to put your name in the hat for those. 60% of those are $1,200 vouchers for income eligible households. The other 40% are $300 vouchers. Look at the price of e-bikes to know what you're going to be able to get for those amounts, but it's a huge help to people. So I'm very happy about those. And events coming up, Cascade Washington Bikes is organizing the Bike Walk Roll Summit in Wenatchee. Starts April 1st with just an activity, and then 2 days of conferencing. Similar to this, where you've got the energy in the room, a lot of learning. A ton of my staff is going to be doing presentations. I'm just embarrass Grace for a second. Going to be leading a session on regional trails when Representative Nance talked about trails that take you somewhere, take you to places. We're going to be talking about being age-friendly, complete streets, school walk routes, so much more, and other presentations. So really a great time, and Wenatchee is a beautiful place to be. I think that's all I got going on, but it's a lot.
Transit Riders Union, we are having our monthly social on Tuesday this month. We are doing that in collaboration with a planning work meeting. So Transit Riders Union, if you're not familiar with here in the Puget Sound area, we are a member, grassroots, energized force who the members decide on what they want to work on, and then the organization supports that. And so on Tuesday, we're having our last get-together at the Kathy Hillenbrand room on Capitol Hill, which is right literally on top of the Capitol Hill Light Rail Station at 5:30. And so if you're at all interested in learning more about the Transit Riders Union, you want to meet some transit advocates, very dedicated transit riders for any of your projects, it would be a great time to come out and hang out. And 5:30 to 7:30 on Tuesday if you're around.
Anyone else? Joe?
Thanks, Brady. Joe here. I'm going to be very quick. There's always public meetings of public transit. You can go to your public transit and then the About button website, your public transit website, and the About button, there's a board of directors. You click that, it will tell you when the next meeting is. It's important that you speak up. Decisions are made by those who show up. I learned that watching The West Wing as a kid. Made me a lifelong politician, and that's why I'm fighting so hard to get on a transit board, because as you'll find out, your input's very important this year. Sound Transit's in crisis. My local transit's thinking about going to Orca or staying with UMO. Your transit, Whatcom Transit Authority last year had to make a tough decision to raise fares. Rather than making decisions about the future of paratransit, because it's so expensive, $100 per trip, it's not uncommon. That's too much to ask taxpayers. They'll tell you that. So this is a hard time. So decisions are made by those who show up. So please show up. Thank you.
And with that, I want to thank everybody who showed up. You all showed up here 2 days in a row. I know we've had some wonderful and difficult conversations. I will engage you again with an email, both with a survey about this meeting and how we can improve things, but also with the information that was shared amongst all. And I want to continue that conversation. We talked about a couple of communities of practice. I consider this to be a community of practice. We have joined together once a year for the past 8 years, but we can do more to continue that conversation, at least quarterly, perhaps not in this kind of 2-day-long engagement, but certainly keeping up those conversations. I hope you'll enjoy the reception outside. Don't run away quite yet, and thank you for those on Zoom that joined us today as well. I assume there were no contributions on Zoom? No. Okay, awesome.
Shout out to Anat and the Center team for making this all possible.